Welcome back, everybody, and this is our fourth and final week. This is the tinkering part of the lesson. And I just wanted to show you at this stage of the game, everyone's picture and painting will be a little different. And there will be a little different things that you might want to troubleshoot. So I'm going to try and guess what things you might want to have a look at again, just to revisit it and fix things up. So I wanted to show you, even though this is actually the fourth time I've painted it, mine are all a little different as well. So here's the original painting, and here is the second one I did. Actually the third, because I went over top of the second one. And then here's the one that we've been working on step by step. So they're all a little different, and all of them have a little different areas that we want to troubleshoot. So I'm just going to give you a few tips of things that you might want to look at. If you notice in the original painting, the sky was a lot darker. So that's something that you can change. It also had little wisps of clouds in. So I tend to like to just start at the top and work my way down, because then my sleeve's not in the middle of the painting and things like that. So if we take, we go back to our original colors, same white, yellow, burnt sienna blue, and red. And we decide we want to darken this area. I'm going to go back to my original big brush. I'm taking a little red and a little blue. And right away you've got a really, really dark color. Probably a little darker than what we're hoping. So I'm going to thin it down a bit. So there's different techniques you can use, but thinning your paint will help to take away from how much paint is going on. We can just swipe on some of that thinner dark purple in that corner if we wish. Using my brush on the edge sometimes, and sometimes I'm turning it a little bit. We can darken up that corner if you've got a major storm going on. So I keep my brush fairly wet so that I can keep that paint thin and light, and I'm darkening those clouds in that corner. You don't need to if you're really happy with how your clouds are right now. Go have a coffee and you can join us back when we get to an area where you wish you had a little more help with. I'm also going to take this dark color, and I'm going on with the edge of my brush, and I'm going to add some of those little edges in. I don't like that little yellow spot there, so I'm going to take that out a little bit. And when you're doing clouds, remember that the light bit faces the sun. So in this case, when the sun is low on the horizon, the lightest part of the cloud will be on the bottom of that cloud, and the dark part will be on the top of the cloud because it's facing the sun. So it's just something to always keep in mind. Even with clouds, you want to make sure you know where your light is going to be. So over on this side, maybe we'll just edge in a few little bits. I'm rubbing it with my finger, keeping my paint thin. And I could tinker with a little bit here. Just sort of give a little more polish to your painting. Now this side of these clouds are going to be darker than the side on the sun side. And we can just edge in a little bit. And it just depends how happy you are with your sky, or probably you worked a lot harder on your sky than I did. So you probably had a better sky to start with. If I wanted to add a little more depth to those clouds, maybe I would take my white and I would lighten it. I wouldn't go straight white because it'll really show up, but maybe I'm going to lighten the bottom of some of those clouds as they face the sun. They could have that, could have it down here even. Maybe there's a little bit over here. So this is just one of the areas where you can spend lots of time, and if you decide that this is needing more work, this is a good chance to do it. Even though we've got our tree in behind, we can still work around that quite nicely. One of the things that it's possible you could decide to do, but I would use a little smaller brush for it, is maybe you'd like to have some of those smaller clouds at low on your horizon. In which case I would take the dark color, the dark purple, red and the blue, keep it pretty thin still, and we could just take a smaller brush and put some of those low clouds in. The lower on the horizon the clouds are, the further away they are and the smaller they are. And it is no reason, just because we've put that combine there, that there can't be a cloud on the other side of it. So you could add a bit of those extra little clouds. One of the things I noticed about mine is the first painting is a lot more toned down in around the sun. This is very bright yellow. So we could tone that down as well. I'm a bright colored girl. I probably wouldn't do it for myself, but we certainly could do it for the sake of knowing what it would look like. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, just to lighten that up a little bit. And just blend it in a little bit. So it's more, I'm going to give it a little bit more brightness here. Lightness. And because you don't want those streaks to show too much, I'm just wetting them just with water now. So we can just turn it into more of a glow. And there we go. So, number one on the troubleshooting, check your sky. Do whatever you think your sky needs to add to it, to give it that look of sunset with the clouds coming on that you feel it needs. And there's no wrong way. Do what appeals to you. Have fun with it. And I'm just lightening these clouds here because I think that will be interesting, that sun hitting those clouds. Okay, so number one is your sky. Take a look at it, check it out, see what you think. The next area is in this background area, these background fields. So in each of the pictures, again, these are a little larger, a little rougher. The first ones and the first painting were a little finer and a little farther away, a little more distinct. And in my second one, they were kind of a cross between the two. What I noticed in the original photograph, and I'll show that to you here, for these guys, is that there's quite a reddish tone to it. And with the setting sun, there's also quite a reddish tone to the ground. So we can, if you're not comfortable with how your fields are looking in between the swaths, one of the things you can do is just rinse your brush out really well. At this stage of the game, we want to keep a really nice clean brush because we're switching colors a lot. I'll just take a little red and a little of the yellow, and we can just change on these fields. We can just add that red tone to kind of smooth out. If it happened that you felt your dark line that you had made initially with your charcoal, if you felt like it was just showing as a very straight dark line, just take a little of this red and yellow, and we're going to add those red tones to this field. Now you notice I'm sidling up to the dark side of the swaths first, because there would be a little shadow along that dark side. So it's a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. If you felt that was going too red on you. And I'm going to always be using my fingers a lot for this part of the program, but it just sort of smooths out that charcoal-y line at the bottoms because we don't want it to look. And so you can see how the light is hitting here, but there's a little shadow along our swath. And the shadow is because the swath is high and raised up, and so the sun is not hitting it there as much. And we can do that in every little spot between the swaths. It gives it those red evening tones. So I think it's the red cones of your eye that in the dark, that's the first color you lose, and it seems to be the color that things start to go in the evening, especially in harvest time. You start to see those reds, I think, as your eyes change and adjust to the light. The red tones also really warm up your picture, and it takes away a bit from the glare of the yellow, if you're finding this picture altogether too yellow for you. And just angling it down, always in between. Also now I know where those sunflowers are coming to, so I know what part I have to deal with that I didn't know before. But now I know where the sunflowers are going to be, and so I can shape that red around them, even here. I'm keeping it pretty thin, lots of water on my brush. And it will help to show the sunflowers up as well. The yellow petals of the sunflower, if we have that red tone in behind. So that's the first thing that you can look at in your background fields and decide if that's what you need. The second thing you can look at is, well, are your shadows showing? Is it something that you need to look at? So I'm going to take a little of the blue, a little of the burnt sienna. I feel like my brush wasn't clean enough and I got a little bit of yellow in there, so that would make it go green. I'm going to start again. Get a little bit of the burnt sienna and a little bit of the blue. Get a little more shadowy color. And you could just use your liner brush for this. And I'm going to start in a little obscure spot, see if I like the color. And I think what I'm doing here is just edging it in a little bit to make this dark little shadow help that swath to pop out a little bit more. It's uneven because swaths are uneven. And just sometimes that swath just kind of got lost in the shuffle. I can also make them smaller with this by adding more shadow. And some of these swaths I felt got a little bit big on me. So you can see how that's turning each swath into a little smaller and more irregular and more swath-like part of the seed. So rather than doing the whole thing, because I just want to make sure we have time to go over everything, I'll just sort of do this chunk here, but I would do the same in the back field as well. It will just add to your detail. Keep your paint light and thin, because we don't want heavy lines at this stage of the game. And you can have those shadows picking up where there's bumps in the swath. And maybe you want to thin that swath down a little bit, and you can do that as well. And keep that curve going, because that swath's going over the hill. So I just picked up on this middle chunk of field. But you can do this to all the fields. So it's my field got a little confused here, so I want to straighten that up. And I'm just doing a little kind of a zigzaggy stroke with my brush, just to edge it under. The other thing that you may feel you need to do is to brighten your swaths. Now it just depends on which direction you felt your swaths went. So perhaps you feel they need to be a little bit yellower, and you can do that. You don't have to do the whole thing. You can just dot that yellow in if you think that they need more yellow. If you think that they're not showing because they're too similar to the yellow background, you might want to add white to yellow, or even straight white. It's possible that would be all you would need is a touch. I'll just show you here. Just a dot of white irregularly, and it will look like the sun's hitting that swath, and it's just straight white. So you'll have to decide based on what isn't showing up good enough to you, whether you need to add more yellow, whether you need to add more white. In this case, perhaps it needs to be a little bit darker. So you can adjust each little row of field as you go. Same now with your foreground, same thing. I find this strip not really showing. I just want to change that a little bit. Almost like I need to darken the background in behind. So to do that, I'm just going to take that red color and I'm going to add the field in. Rather than try to change the color, think backwards. Rather than try to change the color of the front field, I'm going to change the color of the back field so that it will show up more. So we can tell that that hill is coming down. Now it depends on your picture, but that might be the trick that you need to help it. I never mentioned the background trees. They're very distinct to me. These are farthest away, so they're very small, so you could tinker more with them, but I don't want them to show up too much. And these guys over here, you could, add a little bit to them if you wanted to. You can change the green and give a little more highlights to them. Dot in some color to get them more realistic. Remember, the light's coming from this direction. You could also darken the green, add a little burnt sienna to and add the shadows on the other side, and it will just give a little more realistic effect to it. Combine. Maybe what you might be struggling with the combine is maybe you're finding it's too distinct. Maybe it's showing up a little bit too much. In the first combine, it's just a smudge. This combine in this one is more the size you're working with, because remember we drew around that first one, so it's a little bit bigger. So, but it still is just smudged at the bottom. And this is the actual picture I took this from. And the combine is definitely indistinct. You can't see any of the base of it at all. But what you can do to help that, if you find that you're finding that the base is just showing up too much. Same thing as we did with those fields in the background. You might want to take some of those red tones, and maybe we're going to just slide some of that red tone right over your combine and your field, because it's evening. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to it to make it a little bit darker, so not quite so bright. And we're going to just edge in here and give a little bit more of those orange tones to here. And we would just approach these swaths the same way as we did the background swaths. You could add the shadows in and then put a little more light on it. Just blend those things in a little bit more. And maybe we want to get that just kind of a gray tone going. So I just added some yellow to that blue and just some streaks. You can shuffle it up around a little bit with your finger to just blur those edges a little bit. Your combine's really dark, that's okay. Mine, I noticed, looks a bit like I have a lot, maybe a collie dog driving the tractor, so I might want to shape that a little bit to get it looking like a human form. So just look at the details now and see what you think needs a little tinkering with. You can darken the color on your combine if you want to, but you can see by the original picture it's not very distinct at all. So it's just a shape in there so that we all know what's happening there. The thing that probably you'll want to tinker with, I think, is your sunflowers. And sunflowers, you can probably take lots of time with them, and it's all going to be about getting that color to show from in behind. So if I just put yellow there, it might not show quite enough. So I might have to lighten that yellow with some white. And when I lighten the yellow, it'll show up better. I should have used this example over here, because if I darken this, then these will also show up better as well. So look at your background, see what you need to do to get those sunflowers to show up. It's contrast. You need light on dark and dark on light. And you can add green leaves in, and anywhere that you think that might make the difference. So because this one is having a hard time showing, maybe there's some green back in there that's making that show up better. So you just tinker away by adding whatever colors you need to give the flowers, those flowers definition. Keep working away bit by bit, and you can add flowers out here if you wanted to add, because you felt you needed a little more flowers showing. Maybe there's a guy, the kind that's just sticking out like this. And you've got that stem is coming in through here and tucked into the back here. So this is the time you can take as much time as you need to just add what flowers or what leaves or petals you think you need. So he's poking out there, but he needs some petals, right? So in order to do that, I'll take my burnt sienna, because I can see it's dark there. I'm going to put these petals in, but we're going to have them facing the other direction, and I'm not going to wait till it dries, because I want these to be a little bit darker so that they'll show. You just add those things in as you go. The fence, I feel like the fence should be reasonably straightforward, but if for some reason you want to adjust that color or make your fence posts a little seedier, you can grab some of either the dark blue and brown contrast, and maybe you could just give a little bit of a more of a split down your post. Maybe a little more wood grains coming along here. Maybe we can see more of the top of that post here. Get some shadowy things going on. So it just depends. You might want to take a scruffy brush, nice and dry. You might want to add some grasses in front of your fence. And that happens all the time, of course. So you can just make that look more realistic and natural as well. The tree, depends if you're finding that your tree is not standing out enough. Again, we mentioned you could add some little bits of white to it. You could take your scruffy brush, your stencil brush, or your sponge, and you could just make sure you tackle the areas that you feel need highlights. The white will translate as sunlight all the time, but remember, this is a three-dimensional tree. So even though these might be on the shady side, all the light is on this side and all the dark isn't on the other side, because there's always bits of light all the way around. And this tree, because it's in front of the dark, it will the light will show up well on it, light colors. So you want to cover any parts that you thought you had. You thought you had branches, you need more branches on. Once you get that white in there, then you can get a little bit more red on top of it. You just have to watch. If your white's wet, you don't want your leaves to turn pink. I kind of like the bottom part here where it's those leaves are quite red and it looks like a bush. I feel like it's lonesome though. I feel like it would be nice if it had some companion red bits here and there. To just kind of spread that color around. You can also make any color of flowers that you wish. There's lots of purple asters in the fall. Maybe like a white with a red and a blue. Give it a mauvey color. And this goldenrod, of course, and the goldenrod would be about the right color if you used burnt sienna and the yellow. That would make you a pretty credible goldenrod. We can dot in any wildflowers you like. Maybe there's some clumps here and there. Because this is a big area and we don't want it to look kind of just blah. We want to get some other colors in there. We don't want people to figure out that we just painted the whole canvas yellow. We want them to have to work at it a little bit. And the other thing to watch for is the tendency to, you know, if you do purple bits, you could do it all over, but it would get to be too much. So you have to space things out a little bit. Just a little hint of it here and there. Maybe there's a hint of some twigs or something as well. So you could take your brown and your blue and you could make some small little twiggy bits. It might have not made it through the dry summer. They can always be different colors. You could go straight burnt sienna as well. Maybe there's some here. So there's a lot of area to fill in here at the bottom, and you can use your imagination as much as you like for it. I don't know if you decided if you wanted to change your centers of your sunflowers. I forgot that part. So I'm just adding a little bit of yellow to my burnt sienna. I'm just going to smooth those guys out a little bit. It's always kind of a swirl to me in the center of a sunflower. It's, if you look at it, it's kind of like, if you've heard of the Fibonacci sequence, the sunflower's seeds tend to grow in this swirly pattern, so you can have that same swirl when you paint with it. In this picture, I feel like it needs more depth up here. It just looks a little bit frail, so I think I would probably add that to it. And I might decide to do a few flower clumps here. There's the Queen Anne's lace that is a sideways flower. It has sort of heads like this. So you can sprinkle some Queen Anne's lace in it, here and there. And just keep adding to that front. So I kind of want to show you on the original painting, because it's nice to be able to take your photographs and work through them. So I want to show you what we've ended up with. We've started out with a picture like that, and I've taken the sun and I've taken the columbine from that picture and the deep red tones and the reflection in the fields. And then from this picture, I've taken these undulating fields and incorporated them into it, and I stole the fence and put the corner fence in. Oh, I noticed I put the back row and the back railing have fence. I didn't notice that before. But from this picture, I stole the sunflowers. And I added those sunflowers in from it. So each photograph you take, keep them on file. From this one, I've stolen a little bit of the sky, although it is quite different as well. and the deep tones in the ground. So you can go crazy, because if you've taken photographs or you've been admiring the things going out, maybe you want to add a robin to your fence post, or a blackbird. Or maybe you want to add some geese in your sky. So just if you're doing geese, just watch, use a really fine brush and very thin paint, because we don't want it to be really large geese. They'll get hunted immediately. So I hope that you can pick up some tips. You can dry brush, use this sea sponge, lots of different ways, and acrylic paints, extremely forgiving. Have fun with them, and if you don't like what you got, you can just change that area. You can keep adding color once it's dry. If the paint's still wet, it's hard to change the color. You just end up with more and more color. So it's best to let things dry and then just go over it again. And acrylics are a nice way to work that way. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have fun with your painting. I've put my email on the tutorial. If anybody needs any help, you're welcome to call. Thanks, and I hope we'll see you again. Happy painting.